Abuse doesn't just become normal in one moment. Let's take a step back. It becomes normal through repetition, permission, and silence. And that process involves the world you live in and the person hurting you working together. You're taught what to tolerate way before anyone ever raises their voice at you. You grow up watching yelling get brushed off and insults just laughed away and coercive control framed as concern or love. So when harm shows up in your own relationship, your body reacts before your mind can catch up. Your chest is all tight, your stomach drops, and then you hesitate. And that hesitation is conditioning. You've been trained to question your reaction instead of the behavior. Familiarity also lowers your defenses, right? So once something feels familiar, it takes longer to name it. And that delay is where abuse really settles in and starts reshaping your sense of reality. Look, my name is Lisa Sonni, and I make this content because I've lived it and because I've spent years sitting with women who are trying to untangle everything that they've survived. And I specialize in abuse and trauma bonds, not just as abstract ideas, but as lived experiences that affect your body, your choices, and your sense of self. And I've watched women blame themselves for years over behavior that was never acceptable. And if this kind of straight talk helps you feel more clear, even just a little bit, subscribe, because this is the work that I put out consistently. Abuse doesn't happen because someone's confused or insecure or overwhelmed. It happens because the person hurting you believes that they are entitled to power over you. And that belief shapes how he speaks to you, how he reacts to you, and what he thinks he's allowed to do when he's angry. Lundy Bancroft talks about this directly in his book, Why Does He Do That? And it lines up with decades of abuse research. Abuse follows beliefs, not emotions. And those beliefs are reinforced every day by a culture that keeps excusing the behavior. An abusive man, he doesn't need to openly hate women to harm them. We're often wrong about what a misogynist looks or sounds like, right? He just needs to see women as lesser, emotional, or unreasonable when they don't comply. And that worldview doesn't always sound extreme or obvious. Sometimes it sounds calm and logical, maybe even caring at first. But underneath it is the assumption that your autonomy is negotiable, right? You say no or you set a boundary. He experiences that as defiance, and defiance threatens his sense of authority, and authority matters deeply to him. This is why yelling shows up so often and escalates so fast. Yelling overwhelms your nervous system, right? It cuts off your ability to think clearly. So your body goes into survival mode because it's responding to intimidation. That reaction isn't an overreaction. It's biology doing exactly what biology was meant to do. And yelling works, which is why it keeps happening. Name calling follows the exact same pattern, and you already know the words, right? Because they stick around so much longer after the conversation's even over. Sensitive, crazy, selfish, cold, dramatic, ungrateful, difficult. Every single one lands with a message about who you are and how little your feelings matter to him. He's going to defend this as honesty or frustration, as if being upset gives him permission to rip you apart. But listen, honesty that humiliates, it has a purpose, and that purpose is to control you. Over time, you start monitoring yourself. You choose your words carefully. You brace for his tone shifts. You try to stay one step ahead of his mood. You stop focusing on what you need, and now you're focusing on preventing his next explosion. Evan Stark's work on coercive control explains this really well, even if you've never had the language for it. Control reshapes your behavior very quietly. And that quiet reshaping is the literal damn point. One thing that doesn't get talked about enough is how intentional the early shaping really is, right? Abuse rarely starts at full volume, and it's almost never accidental. He pays attention to what you tolerate, what you explain away, what makes you uncomfortable but quiet. You're not going to speak about it. A sharp comment here, a raised voice there, a look that tells you that you've crossed some kind of line. He's going to watch how you respond, and he'll adjust accordingly. So if you smooth it over, maybe next time he's going to go a little bit further, right? But if you push back, he'll reframe it as you being too sensitive or oh, you're always starting drama. So over time, the rules become clearer without ever being spoken out loud. You learn which topics cause the blowups, which moods require silence, which parts of yourself need to shrink to keep the peace. And this isn't you adapting because you're kind. It's you being trained through consequence. Bancroft actually describes this as shaping the relationship to maintain dominance. And when you hear it like that, makes sense why it felt gradual, right? Nothing went suddenly wrong. It didn't happen like that. The temperature just kept rising until you forgot what calm felt like. And this is where moral inversion starts taking hold, right? His anger becomes understandable, even justified. But your reaction, that's the problem. He yells because you don't listen. He insults you because he's pushed too far. He withdraws affection because you're difficult. Slowly, the question shifts from why the behavior exists to what you could have done differently. That shift is devastating because it puts you in a constant state of self-correction. And frankly, this happens after you've left as well, right? Everybody says you should have left. They would never put up with this. People don't understand what it's like to actually be in it. Now, he's got you self-policing yourself now, right? Apologies might show up, maybe, but they rarely come with real, lasting, consistent change. They center his stress, his guilt, his bad day, right? Forgiveness is now urgent. Accountability, that doesn't even matter because the apology sounds sincere, just enough. So you question your right to still be affected. And you wonder if you're holding on to things for too long. You're not being unreasonable. You're responding to a partial repair in a system where responsibility doesn't actually show up. And there's another layer that really matters, and it's kind of uncomfortable, but it's going to clarify some things. In his own mind, he usually doesn't see himself as abusive. He sees himself as reacting, correcting, restoring order, right? Responding to behavior that he believes is wrong. He believes anger is earned, consequences are necessary. Tell me that's not the belief system of the man you're thinking of right now. From inside that worldview, yelling feels justified, right? Punishment is his way of correcting you, and control feels responsible. Bancroft writes about this, right? Abusive men see themselves as reasonable and provoked rather than harmful. I see this in my comment sections every single day, and it is maddening, but they really believe it. That internal logic really explains why change is never coming after an apology. Because if he believes that he has a right to act the way he did, there's nothing to change. The apology only exists to just smooth things over and really just right under the rug. But it's not meant to dismantle the belief system that's actually driving his behavior. And this is why confusion becomes pretty constant rather than here and there, right? Harm is followed by partial repair. And I think I'm using the term repair kind of generously here, right? Keeps your brain engaged and hopeful. You're pulled back in emotionally because something almost landed. Research on abusive dynamics shows this pattern very consistently. Even when relationships kind of look calm on the outside, the apology keeps you invested while the belief system really never changes. That's just a given. It's not changing. There's no ownership of entitlement. You've never heard them say, "You're right, I'm very entitled." They believe they're entitled. No commitment to different behavior, not truly. No shift in how power is handled, right? So this is going to wear you down over time. It really explains why you feel so exhausted rather than relieved when you actually make up. And if you feel relief, it's a dopamine hit. It's not actual like, oh, this is better now. It's like things are okay temporarily. How quickly do you go back into, when's the next argument? You're not crazy for feeling that way. Your body knows something has not changed. The world is going to reinforce all of this in really quiet but very powerful ways. Friends are going to say, oh, all couples fight. Family members tell you to be patient. Cultural and religious messages are always going to praise endurance and forgiveness. Even professionals often focus on balance, but they're not naming power. You lose all of these external mirrors without anyone explicitly isolating you. Now, that loss makes his version of reality even louder. You're surrounded by people, but you're actually very much alone with your doubt. And this is a known feature of abuse. It's not an accident. When you're outside, all these voices minimize what's happening. You're actually pushed inward. And dependence grows, not because you wanted it, but because your reality kept getting dismissed. So if you're noticing pieces of this as you listen, I just want you to kind of like pause, let that land. Do you hear me? You're allowed to reflect or even name it in the comments. That moment of recognition really matters. There's also something a lot sharper here, and a lot of people don't talk about it. It's not just that people minimize what's happening. It's that they often actually signed with his authority without even realizing it. People ask, well, what did you do to trigger him, right? They're going to praise his calm and question your anger. They frame all of your understanding as escalation, but his restraint, right? The calmness that he's using as a weapon that looks like reasonable behavior, right? Systems tend to align with whoever appears more controlled, more rational, more composed. And honestly, that's usually him because it's a weapon. Evan Stark and so many others have written about how power gets mistaken for credibility. This is why speaking up so often makes women feel worse instead of better. It's why I'm completely in alignment that false allegations are nonsense because there is no benefit to making this up. Women are dragged when they get abused. So you feel worse, and it's not because you explained it wrong. It's because the system defaults to protecting order over truth, right? And so if you live inside this whole system long enough, it changes your nervous system. You're alert and cautious and hyper aware. You're scanning for danger. You're scanning for moods, even when things are calm, when things might seem kind of normal. You tell yourself that it's not even worth the fight. But even if something matters deeply to you, that kind of shrinking doesn't mean that you agreed to this life, right? You stayed. It means that your body adapted to survive it. Confusion grows because your instincts and the messages around you don't line up. Bancroft and others have written about this for decades. Confusion keeps women stuck longer than fear ever could. And the longer it lasts, the harder it feels to trust yourself. That's why erosion is so slow, which is why it's so easy to miss when it's actually happening. Now, another piece that keeps women really stuck longer than they want to be there is how deeply abuse actually ties into your identity. You're not just trying to leave a relationship, you're actually also leaving a story about who you are, right? You're the reasonable one. You're the understanding one. You're the woman who doesn't overreact. And abuse threatens that identity because naming it means admitting something was wrong for a long time and you stayed. It means accepting that patience didn't fix it. Society reinforces this so much by praising women who stick around, right? Yo, you've been married 20 years, but if you complain about your spouse, you'll be criticized. When you finally do speak, you'll be asked to be softer, to be more forgiving, to be fair, right? Well, what about the good things about him? You didn't mention the good things about him. That response teaches you that when you start to understand, when you get clear, that makes people uncomfortable. And when that type of clarity is punished, silence is going to start to feel a lot safer. It's not about weakness. It's about navigating social consequences that men just don't face. And eventually, even the idea of leaving feels kind of extreme, right? Leave him? Divorce? That's too much. You worry about being seen as dramatic or disloyal, maybe even unfair, right? You've been taught that being reasonable matters more than being safe. Abuse threatens your sense of self just as much as your well-being. So if you stay longer, hoping clarity is going to arrive and it won't cost you anything, I hate to tell you, when you finally name what happened, the response can be disbelief, minimization, or pressure to smooth everything over. And that reaction doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means that the system struggles to sit with that. That's the truth. Abuse doesn't just harm you alone, right? It's not just private. It corners you very publicly. And seeing that helps explain why leaving can feel like jumping off a cliff. Understanding all of this doesn't erase the harm, but it does kind of steady you, right? Patterns replace self-blame. Behavior starts to make sense in context. And if this kind of clarity helps you feel more grounded, subscribe and stay with this work because I keep talking about this. Women really deserve the language that matches their reality. You don't need slogans or pressure. You just need the truth. You need to name it. And if at some point you want support sorting through whatever this might bring up, you're welcome to work with me privately, join one of my group coaching programs, or join my monthly community called She Rises Collective. Those spaces exist to support steadiness and healing, not urgency. So for now, what matters the most is that you just trust yourself a little bit more than you did before. What you lived through had a shape and a logic to it, and seeing that clearly is a turning point, and you're allowed to take it at your own pace.